everyone. Welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and we have folks from the community to come on for conversation about the various things that they do. And with us today is Ken Lockie. Ken is a British singer-songwriter and producer, and is best known as the creative force behind the band Cowboys International, which some of you might remember. They recorded on the Virgin label. Ken recorded and played with many post-punk and new wave era musicians, and toured extensively throughout the UK and Europe. Ken turned to producing, licensing, and telecommunications, and is now here in Brattleboro with his wife, Laura. They are producers of the series Inside Local Music, which is broadcast here on BCTV, and for which they won the 2024 Best New Series Award. Welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you, Wendy.
You're very welcome. It's nice to have an award winner on our show.
Yeah, it was very nice to receive an award.
Yeah, it was great. It was a wonderful evening. And also for folks in the audience to know that we have BCTV has a yearly annual awards night to which the public is always invited. And you could have come and see Ken and Laura get the award. But it's a really fun night, so that's usually in November, so stay tuned for that. Ken, this series that you and Laura have been working on for a while now, and what you're doing is you're going out into the community and you're finding local musicians,
right,
and filming them, but also they're performing a bit as well as being interviewed.
Yeah. So we pretty much just found some interesting people and opportunities that they came along. Some different players, Alex Pasterhoff, Ian Gallipo, we saw him at a show in Center Congregation, and he had some really powerful material. And other people like Jesse Lepkov, Jesse plays a lot, he's in different locations doing his thing. And, I came to know he was doing some backyard show up at his place in Marlborough, so we went out and filmed it, and came to learn of his Baroque group as well, the Amphion Ensemble Baroque, and we filmed that. So it's a variety of things, but basically looking for, strong music talent that's got something going on,
Yeah, and you're unearthing people as well. I mean, I
hopefully,
I think you have the same situation that I do, is finding people in the community that you have no idea about.
Yeah.
I've been here a really long time, and I keep finding people, who are doing extraordinary things, and getting them on the show to talk about it. And I think that your series, your interviews and talking to the musicians, you get a real sense for who they are, because it's usually in their studios as well. Yeah.
Initially, I wanted to talk to them about, like, how do you do that thing, How do you come up with ideas? How do you write? What kind of poetry do you come up with? And it varies. People have a variety of responses to those things. So initially I was looking at that, how do they record? I got a studio, so all the tech stuff about, what kind of converters do you use, what kind of DAW do you use, all those things. We could talk for a long time, but most people don't really care about that stuff. It's more about what do they do and the music that they make.
Some of the questions that I'm going to ask you, I realize, are what you are asking musicians as well. You told me a little bit about your early life in England.
Yeah.
And growing up in the Northeast England.
Right.
You had a family with a couple siblings?
I had one brother.
One brother?
Yeah. Just the two of us.
And when you were growing up, getting to a certain age, I know you did a lot of sports, football.
I did.
Or soccer as we know it, and cricket a bit.
A tiny little bit.
Tiny little, you didn't like it that much.
Disinterested in cricket mainly. Yeah.
And rounders, which is like baseball.
For school.
Yeah. Was there any music in your family? Any musicians?
My dad sang in a choir, in a local choir. He was, from World War II, he was an airman. And he sang in a choir when he got back. He was an engineer. And My brother played guitar, which made me inclined not to play guitar. One of those kind of sibling things. You know, he went to art college, which made me inclined not to go to art college, although I probably should have. But things like that, not really. I got interested after I'd left home and was living in London and decided to play saxophone. So I acquired a tenor saxophone, took a couple of lessons, and, you know, just began to blow it. Listen to records and try to do things on records, and came to realize that, you know, rock music was pretty boring territory for saxophone players. So I got into other instruments, bought a piano, learned how to play piano, and became interested in recording. I had facility to do that. I was living in a squat in Regent's Park in London, and I was able to kind of make a studio out of it. And there was other musicians who had parts of a drum kit. I brought in a piano. There was occasionally different instruments in there, like a clavinet or different amps and things that I could borrow. And I did.
So you're primarily self-taught?
Yeah.
And then hanging out with some guys.
Yeah.
Just to go back, when you say a squat, does that mean like what we call couch surfing? Or
No. No, a squat is actually where you take on possession of an abandoned building.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So right around Regent's Park, which, if you look at it from the park side, you've got all this Regency architecture, but on the back were these little mews homes, which chauffeurs, maids, servants, and stuff like that would live in smaller places. And what I ended up with was taking over a garage space, which was a garage until I got there, and painted it, built a wall, put windows in and stuff, and made a living space.
Did you have like a landlord that you paid money to?
No, there was no landlord involved.
You just literally
There was
squatted.
no rent involved.
Wow.
It was the beauty of the squat.
Yes.
For years in London, I had paid rent. But then some friends said, why don't you come over here, because you don't need to pay rent.
Wild. That's amazing. You know, after I spoke with you the other day about, you were talking about living in the West End. And so I got that Dire Straits song stuck in my head, Walking in the Wild West End.
Yeah.
And I actually took a look at the lyrics, which I'd never really paid attention to, but it really was kind of wild back then. There's a lot going on, a lot of kind of music that, as you said, people who had gotten bored with rock and roll and the punk scene or post-punk scene, I'm not sure what, you can correct me, started happening around that time.
It was all
right?
bubbling up, because people were kind of bored with the prog rock stuff. They were being fed from TV and radio. Yeah. And they wanted something similar. So, you know, the Ramones were doing it in America, and similarly groups like the Clash, the Damned, the Pistols, and a lot of others were starting to do it too, because it was kind of easy music to take on and play. Yeah. It's simpler, but it's got power and energy to it.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
And the whole thing, you know, took off with pretty much on the back of the Sex Pistols with their TV kind of. They just burst into the media through one particular interview on Thames TV. Yeah.
Yes, and so you were working your way into that arena.
Well, I was kind of running kind of parallel to that, you know. Living in that location, it was a walk for me to the West End, and so I could get down to Oxford Street. Saw the Sex Pistols at 100 Club. There's maybe 30 people in the room, and you know, saw the Clash in some of their early gigs at the ICA on the Mall, and there were small shows. You know, not many people knew about it, but once that TV thing with the Pistols happened, it just
Yeah.
overnight
Yeah.
there were thousands
Yeah.
of kids showing up with mohawks and
Yeah.
kilts and bondage gear
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And it seems like, I don't know, I guess that was true in America too, but the same thing happened, of course, when the Beatles came over, and
Yeah.
overnight every guy especially was playing guitar,
Yeah.
you know, picked up guitars.
Yeah.
And it's like it reached a critical mass,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and everybody got on board. When you were living down there, were you part of a band, or was it
No.
pickup?
No, there was actually living in the squad. There was another guy upstairs who was the lead singer of like a kind of a funk pop group who were just not going to make it with the punk fans. So I was familiar with them. I'd go to their rehearsals and things and hang out with them. But they had equipment and. They were musicians, so they're easy to hang out with.
Yeah.
What I was able to do was to get some equipment. I mentioned before, the Arts Council of Great Britain would give equipment to people if you just asked them for it, which I did. I got video equipment and I got recording equipment, actually, a Revox tape recorder, which was a really fantastic machine that enabled me to get a contract, because the stuff I recorded on that 2-track got me a deal with Virgin Records.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this was what you submitted, or however they got hold of it. It was you alone?
Yeah.
It was. And
Yeah.
it was something that you had written?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I did. I had this set up in my studio, right? So I had a piano, I had a saxophone, I had a part of a drum kit. I didn't have a snare drum. And I wrote these songs. And so I'd play the songs into the tape deck, and then I'd bounce that track and play the next part, and I'd play the drums. I didn't have a bass. And I built the tracks up. And you can get about 8 tracks on there.
Wasn't that kind of unusual for that time? Because we're talking 80s.
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know how I did it. It was pretty hard to do. There's no click track or anything to go to.
Right. And it was cassette
just
tapes.
do it.
Was it?
No, it was reel to reel.
It was still
right.
reel to reel.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the beauty of it. These things had great preamps on them, and they made a great sound. So I built it up, and I had, I think, 3 songs on a cassette.
Uh-huh.
So at that time, I was unemployed. Plenty of time to, do my kind of creative stuff. And then I'd go to clubs at night. And then after the clubs, I would go and work in the West End as like a cleaner.
Yeah.
I'd go into marketing offices and vacuum the place up, empty the ashtrays and stuff.
Yeah.
And I came to know of some people who could help me in the business, and I approached them with a cassette and said, "Can you help me?" And I'd seen some of the bands that they were representing, and I thought I could do better than that. So I pushed my stuff to them, and they took it and farmed it around different places, Chrysalis, EMI, and Virgin. When they got to Virgin, they were playing it to the director of publicity. It's a small office. He was playing it loud on his system. And Virgin at the time had already signed a friend of mine, Keith Levine, who is in Public Image. And he happened to be there whilst they were playing, and he knew the music. And so he kind of gave Al Clark some enthusiasm around it, which caught their attention. And, we were in contract talks pretty soon after.
Wow.
So it started to happen.
Yeah, that's incredible. And those, there were such different kinds of days
It's
back
the
then.
hustle.
Yeah.
It's
well,
all about the hustle.
You were hustling a lot for that time
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah, I don't know how I did it, but I did.
Well, yeah. And when you were doing that, Ken, when you were working your studio, were you after a certain kind of sound? Did you have that in your head already?
Um, I was after a new sound, yeah. But it was from really kind of diverse places. Like, I really loved like Mancini and things like that, Henry Mancini, some of the songs that he'd written. So I try to incorporate those chords into the song structures.
Yeah.
But the overall energy was new, you know.
Yes.
Some of the sounds we got were very kind of heavy sounding, so it had a rock aspect to it as well. But it was a new kind of sound.
You had a deal with Virgin Records.
I did get a deal, yeah.
Yeah. And where did Cowboys International come in?
The record company wanted me to be able to play and perform it. So to play and perform it, I needed a band. I had already a drummer, Terry Chimes, or Tory Crimes as he was credited on the Clash album. And we held auditions, and there was a line down the block. I put an ad in the Melody Maker, get rich quick with this time and this location, and a lot of people showed up.
Yeah.
But mainly they were people who were into, guitarists who were playing bluesy kind of stuff, which was not what I needed.
Yeah.
So, 98% of the people who showed up were just, it didn't work.
Yeah.
I found a bass player, I did find a guitarist, and we started some rehearsals then, which led to a keyboard player because we needed a keyboard player. And we started with a Farfisa organ to do that, and that's pretty much what we did in our first few gigs.
And so this kind of grew organically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pretty soon you were touring.
Yeah, we were playing a lot of shows, the north of England, all over England. The record company, after about 6 months of that, said, okay, so time to make a record. We got a contract, you needed to make product. So they booked us into Advision Studios in London, which is a very nice studio. And we were in there for about 3 weeks. Had a really super producer that they aligned, Dennis Mackay. Dennis had been tape op and engineering at Trident. Dennis was a lot of very experienced guy. And he, with the engineer at Advision, was able to dial in the sounds using that studio equipment to give us the sound we needed.
Yeah. I know that you went from all of this sort of rock and roll scene to producing.
Yeah.
Did that influence you, going through that process with someone?
Well, yeah, I loved what they were doing in the studio. I didn't entirely understand all of it,
Right.
but, Dennis would, talk to you, and just watching him, how he'd do things, he'd dial things in, listen carefully and dial things in to get the tone he was looking for and the separation between the tones.
Yeah.
So I was keen to do it. Virgin were a very, they at the time, I was in their good books, so they'd kind of give me what I wanted. So I said, let's do this other song. I had another song. We put out a few singles. They got some radio play.
Yeah.
We did that again. That one didn't work so well. We came back and did a third one, and this time they let me produce it. So for that, I had a quartet, a 4-piece quartet, and a harpist and a brass section.
Wow.
And these were all top London session players. And we had them in. They came in, set up, did their thing. We got good takes. Off it went. And that was a single that came out today. And that was sonically kind of really what I was aspiring to. Had a different type of percussion.
Yeah.
And It was just different. I had the drummer play a set pattern for the entire duration, which was pretty boring for him, but he did it. And then we used timbales for the fills and just to build the sound up.
I read that there's a version vault at Abbey Road where all of these recordings have been remixed or remastered.
Well, they sit there in the originals, you know, with Virgin. Virgin became acquired by EMI, who were then acquired by Universal Music Group, and they have a vault at Abbey Road. So all of the tapes that we did for the Cowboys International, the singles, I did a solo album with them. All of that material is in the vault.
I stumbled upon this is a great quote, and it was regarding that, like hearing some of those releases, the re-releases, and it was put out by Post-Punk Monk.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this guy? Okay, so this is what he wrote. He said, I stumbled across both of the Cowboys International CDs that had reached the market in 2003. Apparently, Cowboy Ken Lockie had relocated to Georgia and had issued the CDs on his own. And then it said, the CD begins with the B-side from Today Today. Fixation began with dissonant siren synths over a plodding beat before the rich guitars and bass added a fullness to the shrieking void of the intro. I love how the squealing synths of Lockie were juxtaposed against, there's no other way to put it, a kick and disco bass line and hi-hat that were hijacked from the 79 zeitgeist that injected with mutant new wave DNA to achieve a radically different end.
Well, it's a great write-up.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah.
I love that. And you know, even though I was not in that scene, it kind of captured something.
Yeah, dissonance was an aspect to our sound,
Very much so.
And we would actually, when we played, we'd like to look out at the crowd in terms of like, how are they taking this?
Right,
you know?
yeah. How were they taking it?
Well, some would stand and look back, but others would crowd the front and get into it.
Yeah.
Eventually, we were winning crowds. You know, when you play shows, you know, you bands want to know if you win the crowd. If you win the crowd, they're yours.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Right.
And when that doesn't happen, you know, they walk away and they just don't get it.
And maybe you come back and try again.
Yeah.
Hey, so you come to America.
I did.
Your first trip was to Vermont, coming to the U.S.?
Yeah. So in Pill, I came over as this kind of like keyboardy person. I had, you know, my relationship with Keith was kind of always musical and technical, but Keith was a brilliant guy, and we kind of gelled on computers. You know, I had like a Sinclair ZX80 computer back in 1980, and we were interested in digital synthesizers. So New England Digital was in Norwich, Vermont at the time. And they had a thing called a synclavier, which was a well thought of instrument. And I went up there to check it out right before Christmas in '81. Cowboys International actually did get picked up by Atlantic Records, along with XTC, I think, which the Virgin guys were very surprised. They said they got a phone call and they thought, whoa, they want this, you know, in America, so here it is. So we had to make an American edition for it, and I came over to do some press and promo for a couple of days in New York. Many months later, I came over. I stayed in New York with Public Image for about 18 months. I produced another record with some friends on the Lower East Side, Dominatrix, Sleeps Tonight.
Great title.
That became a banging record in 1984 for many, many months at the top of dance charts and Billboard and lots of places. And so, you know, I made another contract with CBS Epic. We did a single there. Different deals coming along, you know.
Yeah.
It was tough being an independent person in New York. And I had a lot to learn about the business in terms of what the independent music business is in New York. what it appears to be and what it actually is are very, very different things.
I believe that.
So, I had more opportunities, but they began to fade away, and I just realized that, we were having a child, and I needed to make money, so I got into some other stuff with computers.
And went to Atlanta. Went
Ended
south.
up in Atlanta.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes a certain amount of sense. And then at some point you were doing production, pNUMA recordings.
pNUMA, yeah.
Yes.
pNUMA is my label for various outputs, primarily my own work, but I did put out some other things from a young artist in Atlanta, DJ Selectric. He was making drum and bass things that I really loved. So I put them out too. With pNUMA, I established a distribution, so I still have that relationship, so I still do it.
And it's mostly electronic music?
It's a mix of electronic and some more organic stuff. I did put out a single last year, and I had, over the years, I had about 10 or 12 different singles and EPs. They were all either progressive house, techno, electronic, in the box, primarily in the box.
And in the box mean that is a completed
It's all
production.
in within the computer, yeah, there's no external hardware.
You enjoy doing it?
Yeah, I love doing it, yeah.
And you can do it at home?
Yeah.
And you also come into BCTV
Yeah.
to do some of your production work?
Editing, yeah.
Yep. And being here in Brattleboro, you've pretty much put down roots.
Yeah, I have family nearby, granddaughter.
Yep, that'll do it. Now that you're an established BCTV series, which we're really glad about, do you and Laura, are you looking further? Do you have new projects coming up?
We do, and they are for the show Inside Local Music. But Laura's got some other things she's been doing. She's been editing today, some theatrical things she's involved with. I like doing it, so I like, hitting the red light and capturing things.
Yeah.
I like to do it, so I like to take the opportunities as they come along.
Yeah.
Because they won't, they may not come around for a while. So from the music side, I continue to write and evolve different pieces of music, but I'm looking more to versus making albums and singles, just to put them into licensing arrangements,
So it's that side of it,
which is not related to the performance side, because I don't think I'll be doing any performances, coming up or again, really. I think the things I enjoy are mainly recording, editing, mixing, those kinds of things. So the performing side is a lot of stuff that isn't so great.
Yeah, that's right. And you did it pretty thoroughly as well in younger.
I had a pretty good sample of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as we get older, we realize the things that are appropriate for us now in terms of interest.
Yeah,
more
my
than
wife keeps
anything
reminding
else.
me of that.
Yeah. What do you listen to these days?
I've been listening to people like Keith Jarrett,
Oh, yeah. Henry Mancini, Moon River?
Not so much that.
That's
more the
interesting.
improvisational stuff.
Yes, yeah, that's interesting. I kind of forgot about Keith Jarrett. That's a good reference. That's great. Well, Ken, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, this is really interesting and fun, and it's really great to hear stories of growing up in Britain. We in America, the British invasion was such a big deal, and we had so much influx of music for such a long period of time, and so to hear about being on the ground in a squat and walking in the Wild West End. Yeah. That's pretty cool stories. Fun. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks to all of you for being with us today and hearing these stories from Ken Lockie. Stay tuned, and yet another reason to stay tuned to BCTV. Catch his series that is on at various times on BCTV, Inside Local Music, and it's with Ken and Laura Lockie. Again, stay tuned. We'll be back, and we'll see you next time.